Have you ever taken the last train of the night? That eerie quiet, the flickering lights. What if I told you some trains have a destination that isn't on any map? Tonight, we're talking about one such. Lionfield, Route 47, a track people whisper about, calling it the Ghost Line. It was a cold, rainy night, the kind where the rain falls like silver needles, and thunder shakes the very ground. As the last train of the night prepared to leave the station, its whistle cut through the darkness like a lonely scream. Inside, the dim lights cast long, dancing shadows. Only 7 souls were brave enough, or perhaps unlucky enough to be on board. There was Adil, a young, sharp-minded engineer, Maria, a nurse, her face etched with the exhaustion of a long night shift. Hassan, a college kid, already lost in his music, earphones firmly in place. A newlywed couple huddled together in a corner, whispering softly. An old, weary ticket inspector named Bashir, who had seen more nights on this line than he could count. And finally, a little girl, all by herself, clutching a bright red balloon. For the first few minutes, the rhythmic click-clack of the wheels on the track was the only sound. Everything was calm. Too calm. Then, it started. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, and then a third time. Bashir, the inspector, grumbled under his breath. "Old train. Bad wiring," he muttered, tapping a light fixture with his knuckles. But when he turned his gaze back down the aisle, his blood ran cold. The little girl's seat was empty. The red balloon, however, was still there, tied to the seat handle, swaying gently as if caressed by an unseen hand. Bashir's voice, though he tried to keep it steady, trembled. "Where's your guardian, child?" A quiet-out silence was his only reply. The silence was heavy, thick, and wrong. Maria, the nurse, stood up, her professional calm masking a growing unease. "Maybe she went to the next compartment," she suggested, her voice a little too bright, but as she walked down the narrow passage to check, she found the connecting door was locked. Not just locked, it was bolted from the other side. Just then, the train lurched violently, shaking everyone in their seats. The windows rattled as if they were about to shatter. Hassan was jolted awake, ripping his earphones out. "What's happening?" he stammered, his eyes wide with confusion. Before anyone could even think of an answer, the lights went out. Not a flicker this time. They died completely, plunging the carriage into absolute, suffocating darkness. The only sound left was the train, a metal beast racing through the blackness, and then another sound joined it. A faint giggle. It was soft, childlike, but there was something twisted in it, something that made the hair on your arms stand up. The passengers froze, their breath caught in their throats. The giggle melted into a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A chilling, spectral voice echoed through the dark. "You shouldn't have boarded this train." Maria fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She turned on the flashlight, its narrow beam cutting a frantic path through the darkness. She swept the light across the seats, her heart pounding against her ribs, and then the beam found her. The little girl. She was back in her seat, a wide, innocent smile on her face. But her eyes were just empty. "Black pits," Maria let out a strangled scream, dropping her phone. The flashlight went out. When it flickered back on a moment later, the girl was gone. But the red balloon slowly drifted up toward the ceiling. And then, with a deafening bang that made everyone jump, it popped. The train screeched to a halt, so suddenly that it threw everyone forward. The doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing nothing. Just an endless, swirling fog and an impenetrable darkness outside. There was no station, no platform, no lights. Adil, the engineer, leaned out cautiously, his face pale. "There's nothing out there," he whispered, his voice cracking. "No lights, no tracks. Nothing." That's when they heard it. Footsteps. Not from outside in the fog, but from inside the train, coming from the rear carriage. They were heavy, dragging, methodical steps. Thump. Drag. Thump. Drag. Bashir, mustering what was left of his courage, raised his own dim flashlight. "Who's there?" he shouted into the gloom. From the shadows at the far end of the carriage, a figure emerged. A tall man in a conductor's uniform. His face was as pale as bone, his eyes sunken and hollow. The name badge on his chest was caked in rust, but you could just make out the name. "Conductor Rafik." He spoke, and his voice was a hollow, empty thing, like wind whistling through a tomb. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "This train doesn't stop for the living." Everyone instinctively backed away. The newlywed woman was openly sobbing now, clutching her husband's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. What do you mean?" "C'est... Kriet." The ghostly conductor tilted his head at an unnatural angle. "Y'all missed your station long ago," he said, a hint of something ancient and sad in his voice. "You were never meant to board this line," as if in reply. The windows began to fog over, steamed from an unseen, chilling breath. And then words began to appear, drawn by invisible fingers in the condensation. For simple words that sealed their fate, we never left. Without warning, the train roared back to life, lurching forward with impossible speed. The compartments became a blur, the lights flickering so wildly it was like being caught in a strobe. The passengers panicked, running, screaming, trying to wrench open the doors. But every door they opened just led them back into the same carriage, trapping them in an endless, horrifying loop. Maria clutched the rosary around her neck, her lips moving in a frantic, silent prayer. Adil Despera tried to smash a window with his elbow. But behind the glass wasn't the foggy night. It was a reflection of the same carriage, filled with pale, ghostly versions of themselves. And as they watched, their reflections began to smile. Slow, wide, inhuman smiles. The train shook with a final, bone-jarring violence. Bashir stumbled and fell to the floor. When he looked up, the ghostly conductor was standing over him, leaning down, his dead eyes boring into his. "Tickets, please," he whispered, reaching out a decayed skeletal hand. Bashir opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. One by one, the lights exploded in showers of sparks. The screams faded into choked silence. And then, all was quiet once more. By dawn, the old Route 47 train rolled into the next station, right on schedule. It was completely empty. All that was found were a few scattered belongings left behind on the seats, a single, deflated red balloon, a shattered phone, and an old, faded train ticket, dated 1947. The station's CCTV footage was reviewed. Of course, it showed the train pulling into the platform the night before with 7 passengers sitting, perfectly still in their seats, motionless, pale, their eyes wide open, before they simply faded into dust. So, a word of advice. If you ever find yourself alone on the last train of the night, and the ticket inspector looks just a little too old, a little too weary, don't ask questions. Don't make eye contact. Just get off at the next stop and pray you're not on Route 47. Because that train, it never stops for the living. Thanks for joining me in the dark tonight. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there.